You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Illinois often gets a bad rap around the country for things like our finances here, sometimes our politicians, maybe even our sports teams. But one thing we're really good at, and it flies under the radar, is producing power and energy. We're first nationwide in producing nuclear power, third in producing ethanol, a lot of corn around here, and we're also, we sit on more coal than any state but Montana. But recently, the company Vistra, that owns 8 of the 18 coal-fired plants in Illinois, has signaled it might start to shut those down, raising concerns about the future of the energy industry in Illinois. Joining me now is Jon Carson. He's with the Trajectory Energy Partners, and I understand you have a few ideas about how the state might adapt to survive this changing climate, if you will, here. I want to get first your read on the industry, the coal industry. We've seen 300 plants in this country shut down over the last 10 years. People have been talking about, the death of the coal industry for a while, or the demise of it. Why do you think that is?
Well, Mark, first of all, thanks for having me on today. I think what you're seeing from policymakers, even the owners of these coal companies, the future is clear. The future is renewable energy. Right now in the United States, if you're looking to put new energy onto the grid, solar and wind are by far the cheapest option. So as states are looking at building a resilient, reliable grid, providing clean, affordable energy, solar and wind are clearly the future, and all the statistics point to continual closing of these coal plants across the country.
You said that they're cheaper. You think that it's cheaper to produce solar and wind than it is to produce coal?
Absolutely. If you're looking to put new energy onto the grid, if you need to put new capacity onto the grid, right now it is far cheaper to have new solar, new wind on the grid than to build a new coal-fired power plant. Now the next step...
Nobody's asking, or nobody's really proposing to build new coal or nuclear. Those are old, settled, established places that they just keep working and churning out. Nobody's saying let's go build new coal plants, but to just expand the ones that they have, right? So it sounds like you're comparing it.
No, even where we need new energy onto the grid, clean energy, solar and wind are the source that is being built all across the state. And even in some states, it is now cheaper to put new solar, new wind onto the grid than to keep operating the coal plants that we currently have.
Yeah, that's the question. I want to go here to the Vistra CEO who just recently took over. His name is Curtis Morgan. He said this: I don't believe coal is going to have a renaissance. I think coal is on its way out. I know many others may not like that, but I do believe it's on its way out, and our company has to look forward. But isn't that because the growth of natural gas is really pushing coal out?
Natural gas is part of it, but I think it's very clear we are on a path here in Illinois and across the country towards a clean energy future. With the Future Energy Jobs Act that passed in Illinois, that is clearly the path that we're taking. I think coal is a settled debate. Don't take it from a solar developer like me. Listen to the guy who actually owns these plants. But I would even argue that our future is not with additional natural gas, reliance on fossil fuels. Clean energy, wind and solar are the future. And we've set that course here in Illinois with the Future Energy Jobs Act.
Right, and Illinois energy policy is interesting. I think it does fly under the radar. People don't often pay as much attention to it as maybe they should. But JB Pritzker, the governor-elect, has made some big, bold promises. Before we talk about that and how that would work, I want to bring up something else. We know candidate Trump promised that he would bring back jobs for coal miners and really refurbish that industry. President Trump, campaigning again just a few weeks ago in Montana, he said this about environmentalists.
Those windmills, number one, when the wind doesn't blow, they tend not to do too well, right? They tend not to do too well, and they're extremely costly, and they need subsidy. We're paying massive subsidy, and of course they kill all the birds, Other than that, they're wonderful.
I know he was talking about wind there, and you deal a lot more in solar, but he was sort of taking a dig at environmentalists and these renewable energies. He said they're very costly. Forgetting all the sort of artistic rhetoric that he used there, if we can call it that, the federal government did give $7 billion roughly in subsidies in 2016 to renewable energy. A lot of that went to solar. Is that worth it? The federal tax dollars going to boost up all these?
Well, first of all, Mark, this may be a little bit of a surprise, but the president had a few of his facts wrong there. And let me address two of them separately. Sure. First of all, this isn't a theory at this point. We know how to reliably and sustainably put renewable energy onto the grid. States like Texas have an enormous percentage of their energy coming from grid and have a very resilient, reliable grid. And so from a technical perspective, renewables are integrating into our grid across the country, and here in Illinois they will with the Future Energy Jobs Act. On the subsidy question, absolutely it is worth our country investing in the future of energy. Illinois has chosen to do that, and what we're seeing is that these programs are working. They're kickstarting these industries. These industries then grow and get to the point that they can keep putting cheaper sources of clean power onto the grid with declining subsidies over time.
JB Pritzker has said that by 2050, in just 32 years, he wants to see the state completely 100% onto renewable energy. But right now, it takes, there are some 400,000 people working in solar and wind, and they produce just a fraction of the electricity output that we have in the country. Coal and nuclear and gas, they produce way more. I mean, how do you get from producing just a little fraction of energy over the next 30 years to not just catching up with those guys, but overtaking and replacing them? That's
Absolutely.
A huge Herculean workload. How do you do that?
Well, I believe America can do it. I think Illinois has already gotten us on the path to do this with the Future Energy Jobs Act we passed a couple years ago. From a technical perspective, it's incredibly straightforward and simple. We're doing this in other states like Georgia, like Arizona, like California. Hawaii has islands that are 100% renewable energy, solar plus batteries. So from a technical perspective, it's very straightforward. What I get to be a part of every day as a solar developer is working in the communities where we're bringing this new future economy into their towns. Towns that used to rely on coal are now embracing solar energy, embracing wind energy, and seeing jobs being created because of it, seeing additional tax revenues coming to their communities. So from a technical perspective, we can absolutely do this. I'm really excited to see Illinois grab the leadership role on this in the Midwest.
Two questions. One first, is that realistic though, that you could, because you know that there's going to be opposition to this idea, coal, natural gas, they want to keep their market share. They're not just going to give it up just because solar and wind are doing better.
Well, first of all, some of these energy companies who have been traditionally heavily invested in fossil fuels are making the transition to renewables themselves.
But don't they usually argue that they want to have a fair mix so they can have their hands, they want to be involved in all of them. They don't want to eradicate coal and just elevate solar.
What they want is cheap, reliable energy. I think a great example of this is our rural electric co-ops here in Illinois and in other states. The biggest solar project that's being built right now in Illinois, a 99 megawatt project down in Perry County, the entire energy is going to go to an Indiana rural electric co-op. What utilities want is cheap, reliable energy for their customers, and increasingly renewables is the way to get that done.
There's also a question though, back to President Trump's soundbite quickly. He mentioned that the wind turbines don't always blow. I don't think it has anything to do with the wind, but they will sometimes shut them down when they don't need, like when they have enough energy and nowhere to sell it. Right?
We might need to take them on a tour to Texas and places like Iowa where we have engineers that know how to manage a grid and track when we need to bring storage online, when we need to bring other plants on. I mean, this is a country that sent a man to the moon over 50 years ago. I think we can transition our energy sector here in Illinois in the next 32.
Okay, I suppose the question though is it more difficult, isn't it more difficult to store electricity long term compared to coal or gas where you just have a bunch of it and you can crank it out right there on the spot?
Absolutely not. Those technologies are there. It's really a matter of scaling them and bringing the costs down. Here in Illinois, thankfully, we start with fairly cheap electricity. Other places that have higher electricity costs are already bringing storage solutions onto the grid, and as those technologies come down in price, I predict we'll see a lot more of those here in Illinois in as little as 5 years.
Some economists would argue, though, that the reason Illinois can provide cheaper electricity is because it has all that coal and because it produces coal and it does it with just a little bit of manpower. It doesn't need a lot of manpower to crank out coal.
Well, I think another thing that we see, first of all, I'll tell you, the communities we're working in are embracing this future economy, and there's the other costs to coal as well. I met Mark, a union carpenter who works in Pekin, Illinois, and he helps clean out the coal plants on a regular basis. He's come to a number of our community events where we're bringing solar into a community and talking about how excited he is as a coal worker himself to see this transition away from the job he has to do to the life he hopes for his kids.
Those are tough jobs.
Those are very tough jobs.
But a lot of people have them and they care about them. And it's not just the people in the mine, it's the people who have the truck who carry it from point A to point B, and there's the train conductor. There's a lot of people that tangentially touch the coal industry. How do you tell those people that when solar makes this big come on, and wind and all these renewable energies, that their jobs, their livelihoods are still going to be okay? Because we've seen a lot of fear in politics that the coal industry going away would be bad for those individuals. What's your message to them?
I don't have to tell them, I can show them. Do you know what the top 2 fastest growing jobs in America are right now? Number 1 is solar installer, number 2 is wind turbine technician. The great thing about renewable energy, first of all, solar creates more jobs per unit of energy created than any other source of energy. And it's in a distributed way. We're going to have solar projects all across the state. When I go in front of a zoning board and talk about a project I want to bring to their community, I make a commitment that those are going to be built with local jobs here in Illinois.
Those long-term or short-term jobs, though? Because once a wind turbine is up,
they're both. We will have a construction industry, just like housing. Each individual house you built is short-term, but you create a housing industry that has permanent jobs. We'll see that on both wind and solar. And then there are maintenance jobs to maintain these systems as we build out towards first 25% from renewables, and then hit the Governor-elect's goal of 100% from clean energy.
So how do we know that we can measure this, that we're on track toward that goal, say 5, 10 years from now? How much of the electric grid in Illinois should be coming from renewables?
Well, the great part is this is no longer an academic debate. We passed a law here in Illinois, the Future Energy Jobs Act, that said we have to get 25% of our electricity from renewable sources by 2025. We're going to start seeing those projects.
Are we on track for that now?
We are way ahead of that right now. The demand from communities, homeowners, landowners who want to host a community solar project like we work on, businesses that want to put solar on their roof, the demand that we're seeing is already outstripping the support that was in the Future Energy Jobs Act. And again, this isn't theoretical. I'm working with Fond du Lac Township in Tazewell County. The township itself had 18 acres that they didn't have a use for. I have a lease with them that I'll be paying them $1,000 an acre a year, far more than they get from the tenant farmer who's renting it right now. It's subprime ground, so we're not taking good farm ground out of production. If our project is able to move forward, we'll be paying local taxes, we'll be hiring local people to build and maintain that project, and we'll be providing local electricity savings as well.
I suppose we haven't even gotten into the cleaner energy versus the more polluting energy debate either.
The health effects are real. You can talk to people like my friend Mark, who actually has to clean these places out.
The same Mark as the other Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You can talk to the communities, the environmental justice communities. We have another project we're working on in the city of Rockford, which has seen environmental justice issues over the years. We're leasing a closed quarry where we're going to put a 2-megawatt project and share those electricity benefits with the local community.
If I can add one more fact check to the president's soundbite that we played, I don't know, a while ago, I don't think the wind turbines actually killed that many birds.
No, not compared to...
just in case people were concerned.
Yes, not compared to the effects of climate change from our reliance on fossil fuels.
All right, Jon Carson from the Trajectory Energy Partners, working here in Springfield and around the state to expand solar. We'll check back in with you to see how this is going.
All right, thanks so much.
We're back in just a moment. Stay with us.